We have with us Rebecca MacMaster live from Rome in the kickoff of the Synod. We're on day 2, I think, at this point. And but
Three.
you day 3. Oh my God, it's so fast. Oh, that's right. I just got into London, so my days are a little
You
confused.
skipped today.
Saturday, yeah. But you didn't start there. You've actually been there for a while. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience so far?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Greetings from rainy Rome. This is a surprise to me. I had to buy an umbrella and a poncho today. It's been pouring rain. But yes, I've been here for almost 2 weeks now, 2 weeks on Monday. I started my trip with my mother, actually, as an opportunity for her and then me to see the country where she's from. She's Italian American and had never been to Italy. And when I decided to say yes to the call to come back to Rome for the second General Assembly of Bishops, she asked, is there any way that I can tag along in this moment for you? And I was like, you know what? I think I'm like pretty busy this current week, but we can go the week before. We can take the time to sort of reinvest in our roots and see a new place together. And that was really lovely. To guide her around, to feel a little bit of connection, and to see some new things. Got to go to Florence and learn a little bit more about the culture here. Today we happen to be at a cemetery attached to a minor papal basilica. And I was telling some of my fellow pilgrims, I was peeling off. We were going to the basilica and I was going to stick around in the cemetery. They're like, oh, you're going to come with us? I'm like, no, actually, whenever I'm in these countries, I did the same thing when I went to Ireland. I love to look at, shop signs and then at cemeteries to see if I can find any of my cousins. If I can see people with the same last name as me, to remember, of course, we're not probably actually cousins, but to remember the connections that we have in all of our different communities, diasporic communities. Because I think that can be an important reminder in a global era and in our synodal era that we are so connected, both through time and through geography, with places that seem really foreign to us now. I consider myself American, and not in a rah-rah way, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself Italian. But I saw 4 tombstones, 4 separate families that had my mother's maiden name on them. And that was really special. I got actually pretty emotional thinking about it. To feel that connection over time and to honor that connection over time.
Your ancestors.
My ancestors, exactly. Speaking of ancestors to this moment, ancestors to the feast day yesterday, I want to share the shirt that I'm wearing. I'm wearing the shirt from Discerning Deacons. We all were today. So if you check their Instagram or their Facebook or whatever, and you'll see this. It is a drawing by Angela Dimler, who's a fellow pilgrim with me this trip. And it's a drawing of St. Francis and St. Clare of Assisi with the phrase, for every Francis, a Clare. And that's been sort of our calling card this trip, for every Francis, a Clare. That we have reciprocal relationships with each other, not necessarily gender-based, but that being in community, being in friendship, being in solidarity brings out the best of us. Mm-hmm. And we can't be a Francis without a Clare. We can't be a Clare without a Francis. So to enhance the sainthood of all of us. And if you check, go ahead. Sorry.
Just who comes to mind is Teresa of Avila and St. John the Cross. What another pairing, right? I mean, really just lifted up each other. Go ahead.
And if you check the Vatican website, Cardinal Beretta, who is the president of the group that's co-pilgrimaging with us, SEAMA, the Ecclesial Conference of the Amazon, he gifted one of these shirts to Pope Francis yesterday. So Pope Francis has received the message. You can see him, Abuelo Francisco, as they call him, holding up the shirt for every Francis of Clare. And Pope Francis is deeply, deeply invested in SEAMA's mission, which is the protection of the Amazon and its people and its indigenous people. So that has been a really live and interesting part of this pilgrimage. It's not necessarily as opposed to last year, but in addition to last year. So we're journeying as discerning deacons and SEAMA together. So it has become a very global pilgrimage where a lot of what we're doing is in Spanish. I'm getting to practice a lot of my Spanish. Half of our group are native Spanish speakers. We have a really strong indigenous presence, indigenous women from the Amazon, from Sayama, like Sister Laura Vicuña. And then we have indigenous women from Canada, from Sault Ste. Marie, just on the other side of the border in Ontario. Heard great testimonies from them, in particular, Rosella Kenoshamek, who is a diocesan order of service for a service to her Ojibwe Nation, and a residential school survivor, and a long-term community health nurse. And she gave really the most gripping and compelling testimony that we heard over the week. But I'm happy to be here with you guys, sharing a little bit of my experience. Do you have any questions? Anything you want to clarify before I can start talking about the week that I've had with Sayama and Discerning Deacons?
Yeah, I do. First of all, how great that you were able to spend some time so that you're now awake, unlike me, this time to do these.
Exactly.
You mentioned ecclesial body. I was just reading, I think it's the one you mentioned. Most of the conferences are, well, probably all are bishops. This might be I think the only one that includes lay people, women, and the Amazon ecclesial body. Do you want to say anything more about that? Because it doesn't link to our next topic.
Sure. I think often in America and in privileged parts of America, or in the West, we experience the discussion around the ordination of women to the diaconate, or the heightening of women's and recognition of women's roles in the Catholic Church, is sort of a problem of the board of, well, it's just these women who have a little bit too much time on their hands, or it's just something that only they're worrying about in America. It's just their thing. But really, the strongest push for the recognition of the roles of women in the church are coming from places like the Amazon, where there is just genuinely no ordained male presence. There are no priests, no bishops, no cardinals, in that just vast swath of land. So if you have a baby that needs to be baptized, if you have a funeral that needs to be said, if you want to have mass or a liturgy of the word, the people who are performing these are women. And they've been doing it for years and years and years. And now they're really pushing for the recognition that toward their ministry. And I'll give an example of why this is really important. You'd say, oh, they've already been doing it. Why do they need to have this name? We have one pilgrim with us today, or this week, from Bolivia, a very diaconal woman. And originally her visa was declined to come from Bolivia to Italy, because there is no visa-free travel like there is from America to Italy. And when she asked why, they said, well, if you were a priest or a deacon, you would have qualified for a religious exemption.
Yeah.
But because you're not, you don't.
There's no recognition, no official recognition.
No. So there are real things at stake by not recognizing and naming the work that women do in that context.
And that's one of the things that came out of the last document was something very specific of, there are ministries happening that why aren't we, it was a recommendation, why aren't we having the priest bring them up onto the altar and sort of naming them and proclaiming them in these ministries, that we don't have to just have priests and deacons and then nobody else, that we can start creating ministries that we can lift up. And that's part of it. Do you have to have ordination to be legit and important in the church, to be a leader? And those are some of the questions that are really being raised in this past year.
Definitely.
It was the Amazon Synod that really raised the idea of having married men become ordained for the reason that you mentioned. And Pope Francis said it. You didn't really go through a synodal process to recommend that to me. So bring it back to me when you've done it synodal. So
yeah,
like so much of it's coming out of that region out of necessity.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it. So the role of women came up really strong. Global uh, listening sessions and in the document, and was talked about so much in the last session. And there were 10 study groups to go deal with some of what we call the hot button issues that came up. So just remind everyone a bit about what the Synod has always been about and what the role of the hot button issues are before we get into the reports.
So you might have seen, I'm sure you did, I know you did see, and a lot of people watching will have seen the article released, I believe, by NCR or maybe America Magazine about the working group saying no to women in the diaconate. It was a pretty sensational title, and we were all together when we saw this article drop. Whoa, okay. When we read it a little more, it's clear that what they're saying is not yet. That there's more work to be done in understanding how this is going to, or how it could fit in with the rest of the structure of ordination and the power structures within the church. And I think it's a really powerful reminder that when we think of this synod, and this is something that Cardinal Hollerick told us young people last year, and I didn't love hearing it then, but I've come around to it now, that the process of the synod, if we expect there to be a bunch of new rules and doctrines at the end of this next month, that's not what's going to happen. The role of the synod is teaching us how to be in better communion with each other. It's teaching us how to be a church that walks together. And it's a practice of how to walk together. So at the end of this, we'll have hopefully an example of what it means to be a church that journeys together, for us to then continue journeying together. This is an active verb, and it's not going to end at the end of October. It'll only begin at the end of October.
It's a nice way of phrasing it, that this whole process has been more of a kickoff than hey, we just did this thing and it's supposed to raise up all the stuff and fix everything in the church, with some people are starting to realize, okay, maybe that wasn't really a real idea. And it was never to teach us how to do church.
Yes. Yeah, this isn't supposed to be like Vatican II, where they come out with a lot of documents that change the liturgical and doctrinal structure of the church. That's not Pope Francis's model of church, of a top-down change in that way.
It's also not a council. It's a synod, which is what? Advisory.
Exactly.
And so after the first session, he did something in December with a document about being able to bless, gay couples within relationship, not blessing the relationship, blessing gay couples within it. And both demonstrating that, you guys, the world talked about something, the topic came up, and now I can act on it because we talked about it. Some people said, that's not synodal. You did something without telling us. So, we're still learning about this, right? But to your point, this is a synod. We're raising issues, but it's also a practice session of how we're going to do synod. Synodality, this collaborative journeying together. So the report really was, there were 2 studies before, and what's kind of frustrating many of us is we're still not going to show you what those were. But our secret little naming who's on the committee, but we're validating that those reports didn't say anything conclusive yet, is all that was saying. And it was like we were talking earlier, that's not news to people who've been tracking. But it makes a great headline to stir people up that they said no. Well, they didn't say no.
Yeah.
So
they didn't say no.
Everybody can breathe. And the synod is not over, and how we are going to be talking about these things are not over. This is so. While they've said the synod's not about the hot buttons, when you're practicing talking about, working together, you're going to talk about the issues in
exactly.
These things are going to still be talked about. Like you said, there's not like rules change, but we're going to keep dialogue. What's important, and then all that information is probably going to go back to the study groups. So people can breathe a bit. This is day 3, and
In all of my conversations with Synod delegates from many different ends of the political spectrum, they understand and hold really dear the pressure of the moment, that they're taking it seriously. And they're honoring, I think, the hopes of a lot of Catholics and non-Catholics around the world.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, continue to hold them in your prayers. So every time I see them, they just look a little bit more shell-shocked
That's a
and
good
tired.
point. And this is we knew how tired they got last time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So
They're away from, their families and communities for a month and a half.
yeah. So you mentioned talking to the delegates. So talk to us about the conversations you're having with particularly Julia.
Yeah, so our young adult delegate from North America, she is at the Jesuit University in Philadelphia currently studying. Well, currently she's in Rome because she is the second youngest delegate to the Synod. A lovely young woman, 24. You imagine the weight on her shoulders, one of the few women, and then the youngest, essentially, there's one young gentleman younger than her. He's from Wyoming, I believe, another North
Yes.
American. And we caught her, me and another pilgrim, their classmates, the other pilgrim and Julia, for lunch one day after the opening mass of the Synod. We had little panini sandwiches and sat outside and, just really wanted to be present with her and not put too much on her in that moment, just to exist near her as friendly people who were close to her age for my sake, for the other pilgrim exactly her age.
Dare we say journey with her?
Journey with her, perhaps walk with her. We did walk with her. We
Walk
walked with
with
her
her.
for a mile or two. So the delegates started the synodal process a little bit before the rest of us did. They had a weekend-long retreat together where they got to re-meet and sort of get back on the same page, peripheral page with each other. And the one thing that Julia mentioned, we asked her, how's it feeling? What's the energy like? And she's like, it's actually a lot better. Last year we didn't know each other and we were so scared of stepping on each other's toes, starting arguments, being unfair or on, not respecting someone's culture. So there's huge cultural differences between a lot of the Synod delegates. But she's like, yeah, it just feels a lot freer because we all know each other. So I think that we're going to be able to talk about the big issues better this year, and give them a little bit more breathing room. So who knows? But I was heartened to hear that, at least for Julia. And talking to some of our other delegates who are older and more established, who also just, recognize that it's a much different process this year, having known each other, and knowing the physical, emotional, and spiritual demands of the moment, feeling like, okay, it's time to rise to it. So yeah, good conversations with delegates like Deacon Geert from the Netherlands, who is the only permanent deacon in the Synod as a voting member. Cynthia Bailey-Mans blew us kisses from her bus. We couldn't stop her when she was on the bus, waving, kiss, kiss, kiss. And a lot of sisters. Most of our good conversations are with our delegates who are sisters, in religious orders. But yeah, they all just affirmed that need for prayer and grace from the rest of us.
What do we savor that for a moment? What It's really easy to move into our negativity bias and go, there's so few women, and this is a synod with voting members who are women. And the relationships, think about what they went through, everything new, that 3-day retreat, and then the process, and then the process again, and getting used to it. And the fact that a cardinal, couldn't go up and make an intervention, a speech, because he'd already gone earlier and he had to get in line with the other, and just be challenged to have to listen to everybody. And the women and the lay people, getting used to that as well. There was so
Mhm.
much new in the news and everyone on them, and now they've had a sort of year to mature and sit and
Mhm.
reflect on that and get to come in new and kinda do it again. Here's the retreat, and, you got,
Mhm.
Sister Maria and Brother Timothy Radcliffe again, and to be back in that process, it's gotta be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And and this is all new, and women and lay people are there and part of it.
Mhm.
That they
Mhm.
and not just 2 or 3. I mean, there's some significant and powerful people that are involved.
Yes.
So if you wanted to speak to folks watching this who might be, wanting to write off some of this or just be sad, what
Mhm.
would you wanna tell them?
Would first want to honor that sadness, to say I understand genuinely, like from the bottom of my heart, I understand that sadness. And I felt it and experienced it and been in sort of that dark corner for, different times in my life and even sometimes, around here working for the church. Um, so yeah, I think first, I want to honor that. And I'm reminded at the time, I'm reminded of a testimony from Rosella Kanoshimag, who I mentioned earlier. She was on a panel with other sisters, two from Sayama, and one, my roommate, actually, who was speaking on behalf of the congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Um, and Rosella was forced to go to residential school when she was 8 years old, and she did not speak any English. She only spoke Anishinaabe. And she didn't speak for many, many years because she didn't want to learn English. And she never spoke in her native language or in English for many years. And then she grew to be very afraid of her voice, um, became very shy and introverted. And it wasn't until she started working within her community again as a nurse and having to start um, advocating for her community again on the reservation that she found her voice again. And she became a catechist. She became very involved in her church, even though the residential school was sponsored by the church, that all that damage was done by the church. It just does this personal, strong faith and connecting it with her spiritual traditions from her Ojibwe heritage.
In case people don't
And
know, do you wanna just give a quick overview of the residential?
so the residential school system in America and Canada and New Zealand and Australia were colonial projects by the colonial governments of the nations. Um, in Canada, it was often run by the Episcopal and Lutheran churches. Um, and then in America, there were several that were run by the Catholic Church. Um, and then again in New Zealand and Australia with their own Maori and Aboriginal populations. And the goal of the natives of the residential school was to strip the native person of all of their indigenous heritage, to beat it out of them or to let them die, to kill their culture so that they could assimilate into white Christian American culture. Um, it was a horrific and horrendous act of violence on these populations. Um, you can read all in all about, mass graves of children found outside of these schools. It is something that the church needs to atone for in a real way. Um, and certain orders like the Jesuit order have become really active in those projects to restore and uplift Indigenous First Nations and Native American communities in North America, particularly. Um, I can't really speak as much to the process in South America because the Spanish way of colonization was entirely different.
Mhm.
Um, so, Rosella experienced that as a young child. And right before the rest of us pilgrims got here, I was already here, but I wasn't at this meeting. Right before the rest of these pilgrims got here, Rosella, Sister Laura Vicuña, Cardinal Beretta and several other people from Discerning Deacons met with Pope Francis and gave their testimony about their work in their communities as climate activists for, Sister Laura Vicuña, or as catechists and holders of their community's sacred knowledge. They were well received by Pope Francis. And Rosella starts her testimony with, I was 8 when they tried to steal my voice, and I just spoke to Pope Francis. I found my voice with Pope Francis. So that's all to say. If you're feeling sad, if you're holding that sadness in your heart, there are so many people in this world who have also felt that sadness. And I'm not saying that all of us are going to be able to speak that sadness to Pope Francis, but you can speak it to someone you love, to a friend, to a religious advisor. And I hope you find your voice and a safe place to set down some of that hurt and to, recognize yourself as a beloved child of God and a beloved member of our community. And I hope, this is always what I've been saying about the synodal process, is that I hope that the synodal process helps us create a church that loves us all better, that can love us better. And part of that is loving us through the hurt and being willing to hold it honestly and sometimes maybe let it go.
And that's how they started this. They had a penitent mass to kick off the synod. It was quite powerful, I hear.
It was. Did you watch? There's a live stream, so you can catch that. Or I was there. I was in tears for the parts that I could understand, because this is a global synod, so it happened. And a lot of the sins that they were apologizing for example, sins against the migrant and immigrant community, were best given in languages like Spanish and Arabic. But yes, it's what started with this, I think, in a really important way, this penitential service. So we were all in the Basilica, in St. Peter's Basilica, the height of sort of Catholic grandness was in the Basilica, and all of the cardinals were there, and Pope Francis was there, and we were all sitting. And so instead of the participants giving their testimonies of how they were harmed by the Catholic Church to the crowd, they gave them directly to Pope Francis. So the one in English was a gentleman from South Africa who had been abused by his priest, sexually abused by his priest when he was a child. And he spoke about the complicity of the Catholic Church in the sexual abuse crisis, and it's more than the complicity of it, in a powerful and humbling way, to speak about this almost unspeakable trauma that he went through, and that a lot of other people did go through.
My understanding is that was the first time that speech was proclaimed in that space.
Yes. So there were other testimonies about experiences of sins against our common home, and then sins of an ecological nature, and then sins against migrants, and how the colonial project, enacted by the Catholic Church in a lot of ways, has harmed countless people, and how we haven't stood up enough for the contemporary migrants who risk their lives trying to, find a better home and more opportunities. It was extremely powerful, and I would really recommend watching it. But what I think it highlighted, something that was so important, and I've never seen the church before do, is the church saying, we were wrong. We did wrong. We hurt you. Not XYZ hurt you, who was operating not as a member of the church, no true Scotsman, but we, the church, the cardinals, Pope Francis, the institutional church, we did you harm, and we we must seek the act of reconciliation for that harm that we did to people. It is a position of humbleness, of contriteness, and I think it was exactly the right way to kick off the synodal process the second time around, of saying we did wrong. We need to seek forgiveness from God for all the things that we have done wrong. You don't often get a big institution like a church or a government going, we were wrong. We hurt you and we're sorry. And especially an institution that claims, moral high ground.
Right.
To say, as we get this process kicked off of being a church that loves one another better, we have to account for the times we've loved each other poorly or harmed each other. And I thought that was a perfect note to start it on.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You're inviting people to watch it, so it's probably worth mentioning. Sometimes we want specificity in an apology, and there were many people mentioning that the letters LGBTQ are so important to people, and they were disappointed in the report that did not say that.
I understand that.
And those words won't be heard in the penitential service. However, if you really listen, there is very specific that you can take to yourself of using doctrine as rocks, I think, to throw at people.
Exactly.
It's really clear that people are trying to thread
That's what we're talking about.
because some of the churches in Africa do not want to hear those letters. And you can know that they're looking right at you and they're speaking to you, if that's where you're coming from women, from migrants. All these words were chosen very carefully to address all of the things we've been talking about. So try and take that in and listen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. So what, so you said you validate people in their pain, the disappointment. I have to say, on the plane here, I'm actually in London, not in Rome. I found myself in a whole other place of why I'm done. So it is normal. It's normal to get frustrated. It really is. But it sounds like what Julia was saying to you with what she's hearing from the delegates and what you're seeing. Again, we're only in day 3 here. What kind of hope do you have going forward?
I have hope in a lot of ways. I think first, I have hope that this is a process that will be adopted by, churches and communities around the world, that this isn't, something that stays at the top at the Vatican, but something that we can infuse in the rest of our global church, this process of hearing one another and being open to hearing one another, and to hear one another with joy, even if, sometimes that experience doesn't match really what you believe or you hold dear. I know it sounds naive, so bear with me. But I've been through some trials and tribulations in my life. I, did all of my postgraduate work in theology and disability theology. I've spent a lot of time with people in pain, people who struggle even to get out of their bed. And I'm often reminded of the Julia of Norwich quote. Now, she wrote this during her second plague. So she had experienced 2 plagues in her lifetime that had killed many, many people that she loved.
And we're talking
this is a divine black plague, the bubonic plague,
global,
that was killing like 3/4 of the people that it encountered. Her second go around with it. And I always, at first I hated that first line. But it was a divine revelation from God. And she says, it was necessary that there might be sin. It was necessary that we might be in this moment. But all shall be well. All shall be well. In all manner of things, all shall be well. Now, of course, all shall be well, and all of us shall work to make it well. No one's going to leave. Everyone has to get their hands dirty to share this process of making all things well. Or the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Some people have to do that bending, but work is made light by many hands. And I do believe that all shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things, all shall be well. That we are in this moment, but moments don't last forever, and nothing is so bad that it never ends. So that's my hope of this, that we can, as a church, as a group of people, as you and me, as sisters and brothers and siblings, that we can rise from this moment and love each other a little better. I think we can.
I agree.
I really do.
I agree. And that's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, I mean, you and I and some friends are wanting to get our hands dirty and do this in Detroit and to help heal wounds and build bridges. People who both love the church and just see things differently. Why can't we come together? That's what they learned last October, of how they could disagree. They were elated. We can disagree and do
we
it
can disagree
in this way. Yeah. They were lifted up, that dark heaviness on their shoulders. We can do that. And can we trust that the Holy Spirit's going to do something really holy and beautiful if we just have the courage to come across that bridge and hold each other in the love of the church and listen. So thank you. We look forward to your future reports.
Yeah, I look forward to giving them. It's I'm on the edge of my seat with all of you guys about how this will all shake out. But I've been so heartened by the people I've met here on this trip. The wide range of issues and loves and charisms that they bring with them. And yeah, Detroit's here. We're making it happen.
Detroit is here. Thank you for representing
Detroit's here.
Yep. Yeah. And carrying it forward. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.